So welcome to another video from theplayersaid.com. Today we're doing an after-action report of The Dark Summer, Normandy 1944 from GMT Games. This is obviously a World War II two-player game from GMT. I'm actually playing with Grant today.
Hey!
So what we're going to do is we'll just kind of go through a little bit of the setup and what this looks like, and after the end of each of the 10 rounds, if we don't get sudden death, we'll kind of sum up for you what's going on so you can kind of follow the action with us. So obviously this is, you know, June 6, 1944, and we are full-blown he's about to do D-Day. And basically, all the units are kind of crammed up here at the top. You have all of the British, Polish, Canadian, Commonwealth forces in these landing boxes, as do we have US here for Omaha and Utah. We've got Rangers and Pointe du Hoc. There's a big long line of these strong points, which have an unknown strength value. Once you attack them, they'll flip over, and we'll kind of see what there is.
Pretty cool, I think.
Yes, and there's also a few more mobile Ost battalions, which have a similar concept. And then we've got some Germans stacked up in Cherbourg and defending the peninsula up here, and then just a couple units kind of kicking around as a somewhat disorganized defense that are going to kind of come in. So basically, we're just going to get to it. This is a chit pull game, so we're going to kind of pull some chits and do what happens. But for this very first turn, it's a bit more structured. We're going to do a first wave of landings, then there'll be a German reaction, then a second wave of landings, and then another German reaction, and then we get to the chit pull, which I've thrown everywhere, and we'll kind of wrap up. So we'll see you at the end of turn one. So welcome to the end of turn one. This is probably, I don't know if this is one of the longest turns of the game, but it may well be, because we had to do all of the landings, and that's got its own little subset of rules. So you can see here for the action round track, it is absolutely chock full. So we did kind of the first fixed movements where it was landing guys on the beaches, taking out the strong points, and then it goes into regular chit pulls. So we have basically the British and Commonwealth forces have established a pretty strong beachhead and cleared everything out. And unfortunately, the way that their chits were, one of theirs was wasted because I put too many combat ones in there, but they got a strong line, and then they're obviously eyeing Con. The Americans, they established a decent enough beachhead, but then we've got some pretty significant German defensive stacks going on.
There, and I've got some flak in the middle,
and those are like in cities, so those are very strong defensive modifiers. And the combat going on the Cherbourg Peninsula is kind of a mess. This is a lot of bocage, a lot of marsh. It's very tough mudding. But we were able to clear off a couple strong points, had a couple of exchange results, and
which are always good for the Germans.
Yeah, and they both lose one results, where it was just kind of a little bit of tic-tac here, nothing major going on. But the Germans pulled up a bunch of reinforcements, and kind of you can see this forming of a thin but also appropriately spaced line.
The one interesting thing about the reinforcements and the way it works is you're going to get, I think I had, what, 5 or 6 different formations that came. You roll a d6, and you only get either that number or half of whatever you've got in the number of formations.
And so you rolled really badly, 2. And so you took half of the 7, rounded down was 3.
So I could have had, you know, 3 or 4 more stacks of units kind of plugging holes. You know, at this point, my concern over here on the left is Cherbourg, and I don't want to lose that box very quickly. I want you to have to grind yourself into dust a little bit. I also really want to hold the British on the east, because you want to run some of your units off to the right.
Yeah, the goal of this game for me is to like kind of break all of this and then charge guys out to the west, basically. That, or the east. We saying east? Yes, east.
Yeah.
And so that's like the goal of this game. That's how I'm trying to score victory points. The Germans are scoring victory points by killing all of my guys, basically. Right. Making this cost as much as possible. Or, you know, you can counterattack and close some of these beaches for auto victories. But it's this race to get off the map. And so if you can stall things here, block up these major roads so I can't run off, that's traditional, you know, that's what happened, and that's what we're trying to do here. So
one of the things I really like about, you know, the narrative that the chits tell.
Yeah.
You know, you can go back, it's got a little track there, and you can kind of remember, oh, okay, this is how it went. I know we enjoyed that in Dark Sands.
Yes.
I know you enjoyed that in the Dark Valley. I think that's a very cool mechanic, and it's kind of nifty, frankly.
Well, and it's done a little bit differently in this one. The chits that you get seeded into the cup are based on the weather.
Yes.
As opposed to the Dark
Which
Valley.
is very cool.
It was based on your different army groups were put in, and then different move and combat ones. But that was all done on just kind of like the historical setting of which the weather was kind of baked into that. But it was a bit more. This one is just like, oh, you got good weather, you can do all this cool stuff. You got bad weather, not so much. It's a cute way of doing Normandy.
The other thing I thought was very interesting, because this is not a Normandy invasion game, right?
No.
It's not about the beach landings. While they're included, they're fairly insignificant and really act in some ways as a time sink. You know, the Allies have got to focus on clearing those beaches, so I want 2 or 3 of those to go the Germans' way, just so you can't free up all those units.
Yeah.
But the reality of those units, the one cool thing that I think about in the design that Ted did, those strong point units have a value of anywhere from 1, I think it's 0 to a 3. And that's kind of cool. When you turn it over, you're like, ooh, that guy had a 3, and he's in the best defended beaches, Omaha, right? And all of a sudden he's a 6. That makes your odds of attack very much more difficult, and kind of created, while it didn't happen for me, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting concept. It's just going to slow it down a little bit. I think your hope as the German here is just to make it one more turn while still having some garrison units and strong.
And to like because then the reinforcements start trickling in, right? But that's this game. Each turn is a week. And so, like you said, this isn't like a D-Day game, right? D-Day is
represented.
D-Day are these first little 4 chits, and the rest of it is like 6 days worth of fighting. And you know, the beaches are your supply sources, and you got to protect them. But like this is a Normandy campaign game, which is it's nice to see that. So what we'll do is we'll see at the end of turn 2. So welcome to the end of turn 2. Grant has scored 1.5 victory points.
Yay!
He actually killed a US or a British airborne unit in turn 1, and this turn, my Rangers tried to take this village that I'm not going to pronounce, and there was a cheeky Stug assault gun hidden there, and I bloodied my nose, and
I had it stuck under a haystack.
Very, very awful. But that's the only points that were scored. So in this one, it was a lot of getting reinforcements in, expanding the beachhead for the Allies, and then moving to try and cut off the Cherbourg Peninsula and make moves there. Obviously, there were a lot of British units surrounding Caen, and we started kind of moving some guys over here across the Orne River.
This has really become kind of a quagmire, though. My strengths there are good enough with the 2 column shifts left. It's making you have to roll 4s, 5s, or 6s to really get in.
Well, and I'm doing that on like a 1 to 3 table, which is very bad.
Yeah.
So, and that's the other thing that's very important to note is this turn we drew storm as the weather.
Yes.
Which meant that none of my carpet bombing, none of my TAC air or tank destroyer support could be used. So it was, I had all this cool stuff, couldn't use any of it. So I'm hoping next turn, between carpet bombing, attack air, and prepared offensives, I can at least get a decent 1-to-1 roll on Caen. That's my goal. Here we pushed some units back. Didn't do any losses. We kind of get them out of position, just starting securing our position, moving things forwards. At some point, we're looking to try and cut these guys off out of supply, or maybe do some large pronged attack there. And then it was a case of just slowly just inching my way through this bocage. Every attack is very difficult. It's risky. I've had some good rolls.
He's rolled several 6s.
But it's been a lot of retreats and move guys. I've eliminated very few units. We're just kind of pushing them back. And all the while, German reinforcements are trickling in.
Yeah, it is interesting. I know these 2 unit infantry stacks have come in, and then I've also brought up a couple extra panzers, and starting to make some of my odds on defense significantly better.
Yeah.
I'm still not necessarily... The funny thing is, here I made an attack at I think it was a
It was at 2 to
2
1.
to 1, and I literally rolled a 1.
Yeah.
And I took a loss, attacker loss.
And it was like the only attack that was reasonable.
I thought, oh, surely I'm going to do something well here, and just didn't work. So.
But yeah, the storm meant that I didn't have many offensive chits, and you had a lot of reaction chits, so you were able to get a lot of stuff moved into position, which I think early game is important. Like, if that stuff happens late game, it's less, like, damage has already been done, so this one's going to be a bit stickier.
Well, and from the German perspective, you know, I mean, obviously I'm the defender. One of your big goals is to run units to the east off the map, and you're starting to get some good units holding my stuff. And here you're starting to move out. I've really got to get these infantry units down to make these more tough for you to get through. If you can punch through there, you're going to get 3 or 4 units off. But, as we talked, when you take units off, you get weaker.
Yes.
Until you get your reinforcements. But, you know, so that's kind of the dance we're engaging in right now. Just, you know, point, counterpoint, you're doing a lot of bad odds attacking and very slow.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are, we're at what, D plus, what is
14. This is 2 weeks after D-Day.
2 weeks after, so we're just starting to get out, and you're starting to get out. You built your beachheads. But if this goes my way here, I can maybe bum rush those beaches and take them out, and that's not good.
Nope,
so you got to be careful there.
So yeah, that's where we're at the end of turn 2. We'll see you at the end of turn 3. So welcome to the end of turn 3. We've just completed all of June, and we had sun for this round, which was very different from having a storm in turn 2. And effectively what that does is it means that the initiative effectively swings back to the Allied side. I can now use all of my strategic bombing, my TAC air, and it hampers German movement significantly.
Oh, you just, as a German, you can't use the road movement points at all. So you're walking through the woods and the bocage, and it makes it very hard to get your... These guys literally, on a normal turn, would have already been in the fight.
Yeah, and
now they're not even halfway.
They're like 3 activation chits, and they're halfway across the map. Over.
It's just, it's actually a very cool mechanic.
Yeah, it's a nice way of doing aerial superiority and what was going on without having, like, air rules, basically.
Yeah, you don't walk on roads when you have P-51s.
No, yeah, and Typhoons with missiles just strafing everything. So if you kind of look at the little action round track we had, it was very front-loaded with Allied stuff, and then the Germans had a lot of moves, and then it kind of...
A lot?
Well, 3. In a row. A lot in a row, I mean.
Yeah.
And then it kind of petered out. So in this one, the British kind of brought on more reinforcements, pushed to Caen, and then we launched... Well, eventually we launched a big prepared offensive with carpet bombing, and we took, I believe, one of the 3 or 4 Caen spaces, so we're like halfway there, and then everything just kind of stalled. It was very interesting. We had a move to get them in there, and then another move, which was like, that was pointless, and then their fight, which
I think actually that movement you decided to forego because you didn't have anything you really wanted to move in, so it was fortuitous for you. The Germans
I needed to move and fight, and then maybe fight and then move again. Yeah. But it didn't happen that way. So they kind of did their big offensive, and then really the British Commonwealth side of it didn't do a whole lot after that. You know, retreated a couple guys here and here, and then we had an exchange, or like a little both lose one here, but not a whole lot of movement, frankly. The Americans, on the other hand. You can see Cherbourg's been isolated. We had a couple combats, and then we were able to kind of punch through, string out all these guys, which kind of put all these guys out of supply, and so they retreated back to Cherbourg, and eventually, over the course of time, we were able to move everyone in, so we're going to have a massive...
Did you ever count up the... What is that to what's the...
I haven't even looked.
I thought we...
I don't even know.
Think we had,
But like I have to get to at least 1-to-1 odds to be able to roll on the die. And if I have 1-to-1, then I have to do it. So
and the interesting thing there in the German box, they have this big, what is it called?
You got the Cherbourg garrison.
Yeah, it's just a fighting garrison.
Just a big 12 defensive.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
There's a lot of stuff in here, so I don't know if I've got enough to overcome or equal, so we'll kind of see and calculate what this is, but either way it's going to be a bloodbath.
That's also an interesting way to kind of, simulate that part of the war, because it lasted, what, 2-3 weeks, and they kind of were tearing at each other until...
Yeah, and the garrison held out for much longer than they were, enough to trash the port, and it just basically it keeps it one map instead of having to have all this extra stuff up here.
It also I think saves some time, and you still get that feeling of what's going on there.
Yeah, you have
where the focus is the center and Khan.
Well, and it's look at my massive commitment of troops up here. And now if I can take this, all this is going to start swinging round.
It's going to be over if that happens.
But it's the time aspect of it. But then outside of that, the Americans kind of pushed back a unit here, and then it was just... We had some fighting in the bocage, wasn't able to do any damage, but made you make a retreat, and then I started to kind of try to do an encirclement, which forced you to then come in to get everyone into supply, and
I'm in a very tenuous spot there, frankly.
Yes, and I feel somewhat similar. This is all... I have just not enough troops to finish this off and to get you out of supply and start.
I do think the difference, though, is I don't have the offensive ability to really attack you. Yes. So I can't cause necessarily any more heartache for you. But I'm slowing you down and stopping you from doing...
It's just getting to a loggerheads because the defensive terrain is just awful. Mm-hmm. It's so strong.
That bocage gives 2 shifts left.
And half of it's being done over rivers
which is another shift.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's pretty brutal.
It's a lot. And so that's kind of... we were trying to do some slow maneuvers. We got the armored units coming around here, but I got to make sure they don't get out of supply by getting cut off by these guys. So we'll see how it works out, but this is kind of loggerheads here at the moment.
Although that very extreme far right flank is starting to worry me because you're close to being able to punch through there and get
if I can maybe move these around and start running some guys off.
Now, if that happens, once again, we talked about it weakens you.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you're like, right?
Yeah, I've got some good SS units there, and my Kampfgruppen are there. I need to figure out how to get them. But the problem in this game, and I love it, I really like it. When you have multiple stacks adjacent to other enemy zones of control, you decide to attack, you really have to make decisions about which stacks attack. Because if you attack with certain stacks, you're going to have to then split your forces and attack 2 separate enemy forces, which is it's very well done. So I
can't team up both of these guys to attack him unless this and this will both be attacked. Well, this one's across a major river, so not that guy, but this guy. I have to at some point launch an attack.
Split.
So do I sacrifice one guy to launch a fake attack, or do I have to move this guy in on a previous turn and attack? The way that stuff works makes you really think about what you're doing, and can sometimes it almost brings the fighting to a halt because you're like, I'm not ready yet. I got to bring in more guys, and then we got to do it, which I feel like is, I don't know if that's realistic, but I feel like that's the kind of thing that they would run into.
And at this point of the game, frankly, and you've started to do that a little bit more, you can't necessarily get 3 and 4 to 1 odds all the time. You're going to have to do a 2 to 1 and a 1 to 1 and take your chances. But no, I do feel my one glimmer of hope is the center, I think, of yours is fairly weak. Now, you're going to get a whole bunch of reinforcements
that's what I'm
this
hoping
coming round. But I feel like if I can kind of keep the heat on you on both ends, that middle, you got to keep some stuff there, and that's just going to slow you down even more.
Yeah,
it's a great game. I'm enjoying it a lot. It really is.
All right, we'll see you at the end of round 4.
Oh, and I have, 3.5 victory points.
You do, 3.5 victory points.
I need to find that other ranger unit and take him out.
He's over here.
So I can get that extra half
victory point. You can send your little garrison pathetic unit to go get him. So welcome to the end of turn 4. We had Cloud this turn, which is basically identical to Sun in every conceivable way. So
I think the only difference is the German gets 1 additional reaction.
That's correct. And the other difference is thematically. It was grey and overcast. So as such, most of the actual chits in the cup were the same. Again, you had 2 reaction chits instead of 1, but the Germans were still hampered by the movement restrictions, not being able to get the road bonuses, having to go off-roading to avoid all of the tank busting, close air support units and things like that. And so as such, we had a number of reinforcements came on the board for the Germans, but the British were very much front-loaded in this turn. in kind of an awkward way. They weren't able to do a whole bunch. They had a combat straight off the bat, and then drew another combat chit, which was frustrating because I needed to move. But that's part of this dark system, is you don't always get to choose what units do. But then we got to move afterwards. So we did kind of a big prepared attack here.
Well, the 12th SS literally just melted away.
Yeah, they're starting to get a little bit melted. I think, did I push the unit back here?
I moved him back in after that.
Yeah, but you know, this is a mini North Africa going on here. We were just pushing each other and moving back in. Nothing's happening. And then I was able to run a couple of units kind of up, ready to move off the board. And that was before, and the Germans subsequently have kind of started to close in this game.
Well, and what I was trying to do was, but the reality of the movement restrictions with this weather, it virtually is
and then
impossible.
I ran out of move chits. So I'm like, next turn, I'm desperately hoping to get that first move, run off the board,
and that's
score some
score
points
you
there.
5 victory points, I think.
Yes, I believe so. Then that's basically it for the British. Reinforcements came on, so I feel like I was able to kind of strengthen this. And we swung a couple units around to try and close this off for supply and attrition. Wasn't quite able. No, I was able to make it work, I think. But it's a close run thing over there. The Americans, similarly, we had only one division come in reinforcements. We were able to kind of start closing off this ring.
The Germans are done.
Starting to squeeze out some of these units. They can still draw some supply out, but it's starting to get real spicy there. These guys are completely cut off in this instance. As you can see, the Cherbourg box is empty. This was very interesting. I had 93 combat power in here, and Grant had 59 defensive power, which he had a whole bunch of units, and so I thought he had a lot more, but I guess the values weren't as high. So we just rolled on a table, and I rolled a 6, which is the magic number, and all of Cherbourg surrendered.
Yep.
All of his units were basically deleted, and as such, I was able then to pour all my units back out, and so a couple of my armor units were able to drive all the way down here to Saint-Lô, and the rest of them are slogging my foot moving down here.
And kind of funny, humorly, right? I had literally forgotten that these little garrison units, I think they're called
Ost Battalion,
You know, I'd famously forgot an important key rule. They don't exert a zone of control. And I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, I put them there at a cool little spot.
Trying to block my little road.
They cover the road, and I'm golden, and you start counting, and you run right by it, and I'm like, what? Why did you do that? You can't do that. You're like, they don't have ZOCs, man. I'm like, you're right.
but halfway through, I'm like, counting. I'm like, oh, I can use them to come here to help encircle. And I'm like, I can't. Like, this guy's right on the road. I'm like, God damn it.
The other thing is, the interesting thing is, this infantry, the 77th, I think my initial, I needed to block these roads up, and I just couldn't get there. Those movement restrictions, I think, are very, very...
Yes.
Very damaging to any plans that the Germans have. And I think now that we've played it,
yes,
I would plan things differently. Although, we've talked about the chit makeup in that weather cup.
Yes.
There are about the same amount of positive and negatives.
Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So and
the showers are kind of a wash, really.
Yeah, you're really not gonna have. And I was spoiled that second. I think it was
the storm in turn 2 meant you got full movement, and I didn't have any air cover,
which was big.
But to have 2 of those in a row, I think, was very harsh on you, and it gave me a lot more freedom because your units were so slow. I can easily maneuver around them, and it's all this stuff's going to start swinging around here. If we can cut these guys off, then these are free to keep going round. This way, eventually we'll start landing units in Brittany, and then they'll start cutting off all these supply sources down the bottom as well, and then we can start circle round, close the gap, which is what was historically done, and that's very much what you can see being able to be done in this, at least.
So at the end of turn 4, for all intents and purposes, the game is over. at this point, and I actually just conceded. We were discussing it.
Yes.
I could probably hold out for another 2 or 3 rounds, maybe get to turn 6 or 7.
Yeah, like this whole stack
gone
is gonna be the 2 units under here are gonna be flipped. The flak's gonna be gone.
Yeah.
The attrition, some of the stuff's starting to set in, and we've also been playing a long time, so
yeah. I mean, it's almost midnight.
We're gonna call it, but hopefully that was a good kind of taster for what this game kind of looks like and the things that you can do in it. Excellent for solitaire play.
Well, the chit draw system is very cool. There is hidden information, but it's hidden to both players, which I thought was very interesting. The Ost,
the little Ost battalions,
yeah.
and then the strong points. You just put them out after they're shuffled.
Yeah.
But neither player's supposed to know. So
you flip them up, and a couple of them are zeros, so they were just rumors, right? False intelligence, and then a couple of them are 3s, and those made somewhat of a difference. One of the things that I liked really early on about the game was the strong points that had the additional Utah
the one specifically just the 2 on Omaha.
You know, if you can get, by the luck of the draw, the right chits in there, you could potentially really slog things up. And I guess now the point of the discussion here is a little bit about strategy. And you can't control that, right? It's a random draw, which I think is cool because it's going to make the game replayable, eminently replayable.
Yes. Well, and the chit draw makes it so that you can never plan perfectly.
No.
Like, if the chits had come out in a different order for the British, this would look entirely different from how it does.
Right.
But it's also interesting, right? They had a combat, we did some stuff. Then the next combat comes out, and you kind of do nothing. And then you think about, well, historically, the British were a bit more cautious and a bit more slow, and you're like...
And you played that way.
But the effect of that from the chit draw is kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what actually happened.
Yeah.
But...
There were a couple times I would have been like, just attack.
Yeah, and you're like...
You had the numbers, I didn't have the numbers, I couldn't afford to lose anything.
Yeah, and what I was trying to do was go for the encirclements and eliminate you that way, and then just call it.
It's very close to being over. But I think there's a lot of interesting decisions that need to be made from the Germans and their defenses. I think they need to figure out how to work Cherbourg right in that box. They need to figure that out because that needs to be a mechanic where you slow, but you also want to slow the future advance.
Yeah, it's like this is almost a lost cause, but you have to lose it very slowly. And hopefully with as few people as possible.
When you took it, you gained, 2 victory points because you got it in round 4?
Yes, it's 2 victory points if you take it in round 4, 3 if you take it in round 3, 5 if you take it in round 2, and 10 if you can miraculously take it in round 1.
We talked about, I think the German player would have to be asleep.
Yeah, I don't...
For that to happen.
Just based on what happened on ours, I don't know how you'd move through everything and get that done. That would be... I'd like to see that. Without it being silly.
Right.
And someone just like, I left everything.
I also think it's very cool. You got to figure out how to get the right mix of units in the right places as the Germans. I think the Allies, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another. You've got 15 chits that are infantry and 10 that are tanks. You just got to figure out how to get them where you need to get them.
Yeah, you've got a flak unit defending. Not putting my tanks onto it.
Yeah.
We just bum rush it with infantry.
Which I was thinking about that. A lot of times, in stories or books that I've read, it's like, ooh, they come up and they see a flak 88 guarding the road, and it's a surprise. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, ooh, we're not going to go there with our tanks. So that comes out to be that way. But I was thinking, maybe that should be a hidden element.
Like you're like positioning them, and then it's me like, we did our recon. There's the stuff.
You can see them.
We absolutely leave the tanks miles away from those.
Yeah.
We just walk up the infantry. There's some neat little aspects of that. I mean, it forces, you put something here and I'm like, okay, I'm going to move my tanks away and try to get my infantry over and attack with those. But what I like about this game is it moves along at a quick pace and you get to see some of the larger maneuvers, the creation of the Falaise pocket. You get the quagmire of Caen going on, the isolation of Cherbourg and the destruction of the garrison there. All those things that are famous that we know about, you got that in this game.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, appreciate you guys tuning in for our AAR on The Dark Summer, Normandy 1944 from GMT Games. I've been Alexander from PlayerSafe.com.
And I'm Grant.